Welcome back. All right, so yes, power rankings. It's late July, but I figured, you know what? It's around the middle of the summer. This is when I like to do a power rankings. The next power rankings that you see will be right before the start of the regular season, so this is the only time I do a power rankings. Now, where I've got everybody ranked right now, obviously these are in divisions. Western Conference, Eastern Conference. They are ranked by where I had them at the end of the season in power rankings. So by division, I had the Oilers as the top ranked team. They do come out of the division there. Vancouver is the second ranked team. They did get to the second round. The Kings and Vegas were out in the first round. Dallas, they got all the way to the conference final. Winnipeg was out in the first round. They lost to Colorado. And Nashville, of course, was out in the first round as well. So, there's that. And then we go over to the East. I had Tampa at the top, but of course, Florida ends up being the team that comes out of the East. Boston did knock off Toronto in their matchup. So teams 2 and 3 on the power rankings end up being the teams that square off, and then Florida ends up being the one that goes on to win the Stanley Cup, of course. I had Carolina ahead of the Rangers. The Rangers would knock them off. That was after Carolina took out the Islanders. The Rangers took out the Capitals. So the power rankings weren't bad for predicting how the playoffs ended up going, in part because home teams won usually in the series, although how they get there is often through road wins this season. But hey, and the jersey that I'm wearing is another one of those Tiburones jerseys that the San Jose Sharks make for fun. San Jose was 32nd on the power rankings the last time I did one. So that's where we're at. Columbus was at the bottom, Montreal, Chicago, and San Jose. The West was really, really populating the bottom of the last power rankings that I did. And so that being said, I will be doing a power rankings video. And I wanted to do a little bit of preview, I should say, before we get into the actual power rankings. Okay, so that being said, you guys ready for my updated look at where I think teams are at? And again, it's midsummer, so we'll see how many of these end up being accurate or not, and how things change between now and the start of next season. And I don't really officially count this power rankings when it comes to, like, you know, all the averages and stuff. So anyways, that being said, let's go ahead and we'll jump in at number 32, and it's still San Jose. Adding Celebrini helps. A lot of the rookies are bringing in. That's going to help a lot. I think what it's going to do is it'll mean that San Jose ends up winning at least 25 games. I would say at least 25 games. That being said, they were awful this past season. So we'll see whether or not they move up. But again, I'm wearing Sharks gear because I'm hopeful they get better. That being said, at number 31, another team I'm hopeful gets better is Anaheim. I did a video not too long ago on whether or not we might be sleeping on the Anaheim Ducks. I don't think we are, but there are definitely some potentials when you look at some of the young stars, the cap space that's there, and so we'll see if Anaheim has some action coming up over the next month or so, which could indicate that the team will be more in the hunt for a playoff spot than where they're at right now, which is they're probably golfing right now, right? Number 30 is Chicago. So, largely no change in the bottom three. The funny thing is, I think all three teams are going to be better. And this is where it gets difficult to try to predict who's going to be the worst team in the league from one year to the next. San Jose was an easy and obvious pick this past season, but that's the exception. So, I don't know which of these teams ends up being at the bottom. It may not even be one of these three teams. So, again, for me, Chicago ends up 30th on the board. They have, I think, made improvements on paper from the team that finished out the season, but these three were in a heavy rebuild looking for that number one draft pick, and now as they try to dig their way out, it's probably just going to take a little while, isn't it? Number 29, Calgary. The Flames, it's been a tough run for them. They may very well end up being at the bottom. I could see that happening if things start out badly for them. The Calgary Flames clearly in some sort of retool / rebuild, and so that's another team from the West that's towards the bottom of the board. 29 being the Calgary Flames. I want to say that's the lowest they've been, but considering the start to the season they had this past season, I don't know that 29's necessarily the lowest. See, and I've got like spreadsheets and everything everywhere. Am I using them right now? Nah, not really. Number 28 is Columbus. So they've added Sean Monahan, but it's still the same goaltending situation they had last year, and we know that goaltending situation didn't help them get closer to the playoffs. So for the Columbus Blue Jackets, I still have a lot of question marks about this team. Yes, getting a new coach and a new GM should help, and picking up Monahan should at least help get some more points out of Johnny Gaudreau. But yeah, 28th is where I have Columbus at this point. Number 27, also from the East, Philadelphia. And Philadelphia, it's a similar story to Columbus. I don't know that Philadelphia has really improved that much right now. I feel like the Philadelphia Flyers have a lot of work to do, and that the rebuild is still going on. Getting Michkov to come over, does that help? Absolutely it does. Getting Konechny extended helps as well. I know there's people who don't like the length of the contract, but this is the NHL now. They're 8-year deals. That's just how it works. They're just 8-year deals. So, yeah, the Philadelphia Flyers, 27th on the board. We'll see how this season goes. They defied expectations this past season. Maybe they do it again. Number 26, Minnesota. So the Minnesota Wild, a team that missed the playoffs, and with their cap constraints, I don't know if they got better in the offseason. I don't think they did. So for me, I've dropped them into the bottom row. We'll see how long they stay there. They're definitely a team too that's been known to overachieve a little bit in terms of expectation. But that being said, yeah, I've got Minnesota towards the bottom of the board. Number 25, Seattle. Now, I've talked about Seattle as a team that could jump into the playoffs, and adding Stevenson and adding Montour could help. Stevenson's coming off of kind of a down year, though. Montour, we'll see if he can produce outside of Florida like he did in Florida, or anywhere near that. And so I still have some question marks with Seattle. That's why they find themselves in the bottom row. I absolutely could be underestimating Seattle. Yep, that is absolutely a possibility. Moving into the next row, and Montreal occupies the 24th spot. So as I was going through and figuring out where everybody should be for this video, Montreal actually moved out of the bottom row. I had them in the bottom row to start today, but late July and all that. But yeah, Montreal 24th. I do expect improvement from them this season. I don't expect a ton of improvement. I think they still end up outside the playoffs, but there should be some improvement from them. They've got a lot of good young players, and Slavkovsky, with that new extension, he might get into that point per game range this year. Number 23, and wildly unpredictable St. Louis lands here. St. Louis has enough pieces of this team that they could push their way into a playoff spot. There's also enough question marks that they could end up finishing at the bottom of the Central Division. Yep, they absolutely could. I don't think they're going to do the 2019 thing where they're at the bottom and then they all of a sudden they're great in the second half of the season and win a Stanley Cup. But hey, miracles have happened for them before, so we shall see. So yeah, I have St. Louis in 23rd. And normally when I'm doing a power rankings, I have more like that I can go into on it. At this point, it really is just, it's the vibes. It's the vibes when you're getting into a power rankings in the offseason, which brings me to 22, and it's Utah. Of course I have a Utah magnet, don't you? And that being said, I've got other Utah magnets. I ordered anything Utah off the NHL shop as soon as they had it. But that being said, Utah coming in, I don't know whether to expect them to get off to a slow start or a fast start, but I do think that Utah, who still have a lot of cap space left to make moves, they could move up this board before we get to that first official power rankings of the season, which is usually in early October. So yeah, Utah for me, 22nd, and definitely some room there for them to move up. 21st, Buffalo. I want Buffalo to finally end this huge drought when it comes to the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm of the mind that two things would be really good. Buffalo being in the playoffs and a Canadian team finally winning the Stanley Cup, just to make narratives change at least a little bit around the NHL. But yeah, the Buffalo Sabres, they have gone through the machinations of a decent offseason, I think. I think getting UPL locked up is important, but I don't know what to expect from this team this season. I can't move them up very much. I have no idea what to expect, and I'm sure if you're a Sabres fan, you probably don't know what to expect from them either. And if your answer is, I expect losing, well, I get the pessimism at this point. It's been a long time. 20th, Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Penguins, I talked about them in a video today and how it feels like they're kind of holding even though they're a team that missed the playoffs over the last 2 years and probably shouldn't just be holding. But that being said, the Pittsburgh Penguins, I never truly count them out. I've talked about before that the Pittsburgh Penguins are a team that I never bet against them, which of course people can call me out and say, you don't bet on anything. True. But I still feel like at some point in time over the next couple of years, they have to get back above the playoff line. They just have to. Number 19, a team that wants to get back above the playoff line as well, is Ottawa. Now, the Athletic and Dom there, they have a model that shows Ottawa above the playoff line this year. That'd be great. I would be very happy to see Ottawa back in the playoffs, same as Buffalo, same as Detroit. There's only so many playoff spots to go around, though, so somebody's drought's going to continue. Multiple droughts probably going to continue. And in fact, I think Buffalo is going to be pioneers. I think seeing teams spending about a decade outside of the playoffs won't be quite as unusual with a league that's 32 teams big or could potentially get bigger. So Ottawa wants to end their drought this next season. I hope that they do. I mean, Ullmark will improve their chances, but I don't know by how much. I don't know how much that I'm expecting Ottawa to get better. We shall see. Because Ullmark wasn't able to drag Buffalo into the playoffs, and he's not going to be playing behind a defense in Ottawa that's as good or as consistent as what he had in Boston. Number 18, the Islanders. So this is the first appearance on the board of a team that made the playoffs last season. And Islander fans chime in that they get underrated every year. They do. Am I underrating them now? Probably, yeah. But just looking at the team, and there isn't really a superstar player, I feel like, up front. There's some really good players. Barzal, Lee, Horvat. There's some good players there. The defense is okay. The goaltending tandem, they need a bounce back from Sorokin. We know Varlamov's great. Can that goaltending tandem keep them in the top 16? We shall see. But for me right now, I have them at 18th. 17th, the LA Kings. So by my count, the LA Kings would just barely miss the playoffs. The Kings coming off of a loss against Edmonton. I'm kind of baffled on the moves that have been made this offseason, as much as Kings fans have been very vocal about the moves made this offseason. And they don't seem to be that happy about them. And I would love to find some reason to disagree with them on this, but yeah, while I do like Fogle and I think his contract's going to be fine, they're gonna miss some of the players that they lost, and I don't know. I don't know what to expect with the Kings this year, but I think they've been passed is where we're at with this. Number 16, Detroit. So I got the Wings in the top half of the board. The way that the season ended was disappointing, but the way that I've seen people dumping on the Yzer plan and Yzerman, to me it's weird because Detroit's got better every year. It's not like Detroit is just, in this area of the board and staying there. The fact that Detroit's getting better every year tells me the Yzer plan is slow, but it's slowly working as well. And I expect them to be above the playoff line. I would think this year's the year. If they don't, that means they've taken a step back. And so at that point, then we can discuss the Yzer plan and what may have gone wrong. Number 15. And I went back and forth on Washington, but I do think they've improved since the season ended. I think picking up Logan Thompson was a stroke of brilliance on their part. And so, yeah, the Capitals I put 15th. Oddly enough, I also had their goaltending tandem at 15th in the league. So there's some consistency there. But the Washington Capitals, a team that's looking to stay relevant, I do give them better chances than Pittsburgh for making the playoffs this coming season, but we'll see how that goes. Number 14, Vegas. I have no idea how Vegas is going to make this work, but Vegas usually does. Vegas has very good pro scouts as well, so the players they've picked up, and especially Holtz, I'm going to keep a really close eye on once the season gets rolling. Even preseason I'll keep an eye on them because Vegas has had some pretty good pro scouting results over the years. It's part of the reason they were so good that first year. They knew exactly who to pick up, when to pick them up, and where to slot them into the lineup. I give George McPhee full credit, but they're pro scouts too. They knew exactly which players would help. Ryan Carpenter's a good example. Got picked up by Vegas during their first season and ended up being pretty good for them during that stretch. And so I would expect Vegas to be above the playoff line, and then I have no idea what to expect from them from there. Number 13, New Jersey. I think the fix in net with bringing in Markstrom, combined with the moves they've made on the blue line, should put New Jersey back in the playoffs. I'd be very surprised if New Jersey's not in the playoffs this coming season. That being said, yeah, I picked them for the Stanley Cup last year. It didn't go well. I full out admit that that's the prediction I had. But for New Jersey, this may end up being a conservative prediction. If New Jersey plays the way that we know they can, and if they can stay healthy, and getting Hamilton back would be huge, this team could be, right back towards the top of that division. Number 12, Toronto. So one question with the Toronto Maple Leafs that I find myself asking is, have they peaked? Have they already had their best seasons? Is this a team that, now as the years go by and some of these guys are getting older, are we going to see this team falling off at least a little bit? And this is going to be a huge year because Marner and Tavares both on expiring contracts. There's been talk of both of them getting extensions. This is, of course, media discussed and driven, but there's always the possibility that they keep Tavares on a much cheaper contract after this season, and it's possible Marner sticks around as well. And then we can get into the discussion again on whether or not it's going to matter come playoff time. I have no doubt Toronto makes the playoffs in 2025, but do they win in the first round of the playoffs? I have no idea what to expect. I know that basically outside of the win over Tampa Bay in 2023, winning in the playoffs has been very difficult for Toronto. Number 11 is Boston. Boston's a team that I was doom and gloom on last year because they lost Bergeron and Krejci during the offseason, but they overperformed, I thought, during the regular season. Then they knocked out Toronto in the playoffs, so I'm keeping them ahead of Toronto on the board, but I have no idea what to expect with them either, other than they should be a playoff team. Jim Montgomery gets the best out of them. Swayman's an excellent goaltender. I am assuming that his contract situation gets resolved soon, and we'll have something happy to talk about in Boston soon enough. But yeah, Boston ends up just outside the top 10, which means Tampa's in the top 10. When I finished the season, Tampa was in the top row. And with the loss of Stamkos and Sergachev trades, the Sergachev trade as well, I think the expectation is Tampa's going to fall off. However, they did bring back McDonough. They do have Jake Gensel. I have a pretty good blue line, and they still got Vasilevsky in net. And Vasi is going to be very motivated this year after what was, by all standards, set by him, arguably maybe the most disappointing season he's had. I don't want to say in his entire career because that seems like a bit much, but at least in a while, right? So I do expect some bounce backs in Tampa, and I do think Gensel should get about 40 goals there. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the rest of that lineup shakes out. Number 9. I went back and forth a bit on Winnipeg. So Winnipeg lost in the first round. I don't want to overreact to that first round loss where at times they looked bad against Colorado. But I do drop them out of the top row. I think they were 4th to finish the season, so they do take a drop. Based on that result in the first round, the offseason they've had thus far, I don't know if Winnipeg's going to be a contender. They had a great run during parts of this past season. They are still capable of that. I still like the team. The Ehlers trade, of course, is talked about a lot, and when it's going to happen and where he's going to go and what's going to happen. But at this point, with the uncertainty around the Jets, I did drop them out of the top row. Number 8, Vancouver. So I know that in no offseason have I had Vancouver in the top row. That just hasn't happened. The Canucks, they pushed the Oilers to 7 games. They did that without Demko. They did it with Besser laboring and other injuries as well. So if the Canucks can stay healthy, if Demko can stay healthy especially, and if Shilovs can play during the regular season like he did in these playoffs, Vancouver should be in contention, at the very least in the West for a top spot. They may not end up finishing first in their division again, but that's not the end of the world, right? If Florida didn't end up passing Boston, I think they still end up winning the Stanley Cup. So there's that. But Vancouver, I think, is going to be dangerous. I think there's enough good players there that they should remain in the playoffs. And honestly, that's great news for Canuck fans because it's been a while. It's expensive for Canuck fans because all of a sudden ticket prices way up there. Carolina occupies 7th spot. A lot of doom and gloom around Carolina with the players that have been lost, but when you look at the players they've brought in, is it a drop off? Probably, yeah. Carolina finished the season first on my power rankings, so yes, it is a drop off, but I don't know that it's going to be a dramatic drop off. So Carolina, I'm being a bit conservative in terms of how much movement I've had with them since the season ended, because I was updating these during the playoffs a little bit, just little switches here and there. But yeah, down to 7th place for Carolina. I'm comfortable with them still being in the top row, despite some of the question marks around their roster. Number 6 is Nashville. So this is banking on Marchessault, Stamkos, and Shea remaining really good key players on a brand new team that was already a playoff team. And if not for a major comeback by the Canucks, they could have been the team that was the second round opponent for the Edmonton Oilers. So Nashville, I think, is going to be tougher this year. I don't see how they wouldn't be with Stamkos, Marchessault, and Shea added to the lineup. And so, yeah, Nashville, for me, ends up in the top row. Then we get into the top 5. Colorado. So when I did the video not too long ago on my predicted standings, I had Colorado predicted as the top team in the Central at the very least. But that's something that people didn't necessarily agree with me on. I think with Colorado, it's just my expectation is a great regular season. I don't think that means Stanley Cup necessarily in 2025, but I do expect a great regular season. And of course, when you finish atop your division, you have better chances of winning a Stanley Cup than you do if you don't. So for the Colorado Avalanche, I think they're going to be right in the hunt for the top spot in that division. I don't know if they end up getting there, but we shall see. Number 4, Rangers. New York Rangers, very good team. Solid roster from top to bottom. Great goaltending tandem. I think there's a lot to build around here. Obviously, there's going to be some discussion about Igor if they don't sign an extension with him before the season starts. I don't think that's necessarily the end of the world either. But yeah, Igor's going to get paid. He's going to make a lot of money. And the New York Rangers are going to be a very dangerous team. Maybe they end their Stanley Cup drought in 2025. It's possible. I'm not saying they do, but it's possible. Number 3, Dallas. So in terms of power rankings, I like Dallas. And I've liked Dallas for some time. This was a great playoff run that they had. And I think they'll learn a lot from that. A lot of their young kids got really important experience in the playoffs. They're going to want to get back. So I think the battle for first is Dallas and Colorado. So when I did the standings prediction, I had Colorado first. On the power rankings, I'm putting Dallas first. Again, it's July. I see it on a board like this, and I go, yeah, I'll put Dallas ahead of Colorado, but I could easily have switched them. So Dallas, there's going to be, I think, some pressure on Ottinger to take that next step this year for them to really and truly become a contender. And I mean during the regular season. During the playoffs, Ottinger's been lights out plenty. During the regular season, his numbers are always somewhat underwhelming. So we get to the top 2. And number 2 on the board is the Oilers. Now, previous summers, there have been times where the runner-up for the Stanley Cup has stayed in the top 2. There's also been times where they haven't, where they've taken a major dive. The Oilers, I don't see any reason to move them out of second spot, considering the moves they made in the offseason. They look good. This is a team that absolutely is going to be in contention again. Chris Knobloch gets this team right out of training camp, gets a chance to maybe he can coach them to a 110-plus point season, and we end up seeing them as the top team in the West, and they right now are the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup. But number 1, and this is a rule. During the off season, the rule for me is that when it's in the summer, the Stanley Cup champion has to be number 1. Absolutely has to be number 1, because even though Florida's gone through some changes on the ice, they're still the Stanley Cup champions. So that may change. They may not be first place when I do the first power rankings of the regular season. But for me right now, Florida does belong in first place. They're not a fluke Stanley Cup champion. They don't look like a team that can't do it again. Their run was legitimate. They won a President's Trophy in 2022. They went to the final in 2023. They win the Cup in 2024. They are an excellent team. Very, very well-run team. And I would not be surprised to see them repeat. But of course, that's always harder said than done. So there you go. Midsummer Power Rankings. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. I hope you're having a great summer. Thank you guys again for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.